You're watching the Eternal Tournament Series.
Hello and welcome back, everybody, to round 3 of the Eternal Tournament Series, the 5th weekly for Season 3. I am once again joined here by my co-host, Truedawn, and we are about to get into a little bit of an interesting matchup, given that this deck has been seeing some popularity recently. And this is definitely an interesting build of it. Of course, I'm talking about MaxiRC or MaxiRC 1000, on Xenon Control. And he's going to be playing VSarius, who is on a FJS Armory build, or traditional Armory.
Yeah, and MaxiRC's build of Xenon Control is really interesting because I don't know if you actually call it Control. There is a bit of top end here. There are Varas and stuff, but there's also Beast Callers Amulets and Friendly Wisps and a couple Argent Port Instigators. So there is a lot of focus on the Killers package with Copper Conduit, Predator Instinct, a Dawnwalker. That's interesting. Xenon Cultist. So I actually think that Maxi's build is a little bit more proactive, despite the fact that it does go up to 7 and 8 with Shadowlands Feaster and Var's Var Fate Touch.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is going to be an interesting matchup since VSarius is on FJS Armory. Armory can have a tough time dealing with recurring threats, and that is something that the Xenon Killers or Xenon Control deck does very well through the use of Dark Return and cards like Copper Conduit to make very large and hard to deal with units.
Yep, and this is maybe a matchup where Armory pays a cost to not be able to play Through the Past anymore. So we'll see how that plays out as we move here into Game 1.
And we will indeed. And VSarius with a not amazing opening hand, but it's pretty solid. Like, he's got a Seek Power and a Torch, so he has at least, things to do on turn 2 and 3, or Runehammer to follow. Picking up a Seat of Glory, so he'll be able to play that undepleted, which is quite nice.
Here's the interesting thing about Maxi's deck is they could go Beast Claws Amulet this turn, and we do see that VSarius considering preemptively torching the Friendly Wisp, and he will. But that's an angle that this deck has, the control decks don't, where he can play the Wisp on 1 and Beast Claws Amulet on 2 to punish a deck that may be stumbling on mana or tapping out for a card draw or something.
Yeah, and I kind of would have liked to have seen him hold that torch, to be honest. There's nothing that MaxiRC can play on turn 3 that will immediately pop the Wisp, so I would have liked to have seen him see if maybe MaxiRC has a Beast Caller's Amulet he wanted to commit there.
Yeah, I agree. You could have set up the blood. There's not a lot of cost. There's nothing that like punishes you. If it was turn 4 where they could play a Sandstorm Titan or something and draw 2 cards, then that's less good, but we do see the Orc Runehammer come down here, threaten to kill the Xenon Cultist, but there's a pause. It will go through, and we'll see if anything comes in here on end step. No, and we'll move to Maxi's turn.
Yeah, pause meaning that MaxiRC is definitely holding an Annihilate, which is a mostly dead card in this matchup, only going to be able to hit the Throne Warden and still going to have to break the Aegis first, so... not a lot of targets for it floating around.
Yeah, I think that Maxi's the payoff they get in this matchup is a lot of their like early killer, like the Beast Caller's Amulet and like the Friendly Wisp, these giant Xenon Cultists. Those are the important cards in the matchup, and if those aren't able to get converted in equity and blunt these weapons like this one is doing, he's going to have trouble. But this 3/5 is going to be able to hold back this Orc Runehammer, although the 2/1 will still be able to get through.
And this is interesting. We see VSarius opting for putting the first swing of his weapon, the Orc Runehammer, into the Cultist, and then committing the Die Show so that he can take a second swing at it to clear it out. MaxiRC, if he has a Var's Favor, is going to take care of this quite nicely, though he had a turn to do that already, so unlikely he top-decked it. And in fact, we see he seems to have missed it, so it looks like VSarius is going to start putting some damage in there.
Yeah, now that this Die Show gets to hang around, this is going to be a big deal. It's going to come in for at least 8 this turn. Maxi could play something like Steward of the Past or Impending Doom next turn to block it, but it looks like he's not even gonna try to fight it from here. He's just gonna throw in the towel and move on to game 2, and we'll see what he can do post sideboard.
Yeah, deciding that game was not worth it. Unfortunately, VSarius just getting a little too out of hand with his weapons early. That Starsteel Die Show can be very hard for a lot of decks to deal with. It just puts a very quick clock on. Definitely when you have some units on board. Xenon Control sideboard. So let's take a look. He's got 4 Dark Wisps, 2 Devourers, a Vara's Favor, 2 Ravenous Thorn Beasts, a Death Strike, 2 Stray into Shadows, 2 Twin Brute Sauropods, and an Umbran Reaper.
This is a bit weird of a sideboard. There is a little Ravenous Thorn Beast package in there if he wants to make his deck more proactive, which could definitely be a way to go in this matchup. But there's no like specific answers here. This seems like a lot of transformative sideboard stuff. He wants to like change the speed of his deck mainly with these options here. So we'll see whether he wants to try and go underneath the Armory deck or possibly fight it in a longer game with the things like the extra Twin Brood Sauropods and the Umbran Reapers.
Yeah, and I feel like definitely you need to look at trying to fight Armory probably on a bit of a longer game angle. I can't imagine the Xenon Control deck really pushing him over very quickly without a very, very good draw. Going to need something like a Friendly Wisp unchecked into a Beast Caller's Amulet. Very interesting to note that there are no Sandstorm Titans in this list, which Sandstorm Titan...
that is weird.
Sandstorm Titan, definitely a card you would imagine you would see in any time-based deck, but the 4-drop slot solidly occupied by a pair of Impending Dooms and a pair of Steward of the Past instead.
And on the Visarius' side, we do see him side out a couple Armor Smiths, bring out a couple Vanquishes, an Icaria, a Statuary Maiden. He's just bringing in a lot of stuff to fight on a more of a long game. More specific answers, more powerful threats. It's interesting because Maxi's deck is so unique. I'm not sure how you really want to sideboard against it because it has like late game things like Vara's or Vara, but there's also like Friendly Wisp Beast Caller Amulet draws. So kind of had to hedge for Visarius there.
Yeah, exactly. You need a strategy that can deal with it all around. Gonna be interesting to see all the cards he decided to side in. VSarius with, I think that hand was a little bit slow and had Icaria, although he redraws into Icaria. This hand, about as unexciting, but at least he has the hammer for 4. So this will be MaxiRC's chance to get that very fast early game.
If he does have Wisp and Amulet, Visarius doesn't have anything to deal with it, so that is certainly a way for Maxi to fly ahead here. But if he doesn't have something like that, Visarius does have the Orc Runehammer, the Harsh Rule, to deal with the more slower threats. So we do see Argent here, which is good, but unless he plays another creature on the side of Maxi, the Orc Runehammer should be able to deal with it cleanly next turn.
Yeah, and Maxi really going to want to have this amulet here. Knows there's no torch unless it came off the top. Would have loved to get in with it there. Unfortunately, not finding it. But now that he does have another unit down, Visarius in a bit of a sticky situation. Doesn't want to get this Auric Runehammer down just to have it cleared away. But
he's probably in a spot where he's probably in a spot where he has to do it anyway. It's unfortunate for him. It's a bunch of damage to take. He could have. There is like the greedier line of just taking 7 to the dome and then harsh rolling on the following turn. But Dawnwalker is not really a card that's like gone forever off the harsh rule. So if they have a follow up to that, you're kind of still in a bad spot. So we do see the more conservative line to deal with the Argent there.
Yeah, absolutely. And that Vara's Favor, in the end, kind of trivial, but still does sting a little bit when you watch it take off a 4-drop Orc Runehammer. And Visarius now in a situation where he doesn't really have a lot going on his turn, so probably going to opt for this Roland's Favor just to give himself a little bit more life. But he is on a 4-turn clock right now, even with this very, very tiny board that MaxiRC has built. There's not a lot of power here, but it's just enough.
It actually, it feels bad, but I think there was a strong consideration of harsh rule there because if Maxi has a Beast Caller's Amulet, you're under a tremendous amount of pressure. It turns out that it's not going to get super punished for it there, but there was a lot of damage he could have taken there, like the Trig and the Wisp. The Harsh Roll here is going to be good, though. He will be able to fall with Akari next turn. So unless Maxi has something like an Impending Doom or one of his bigger cards, Sicaria should do a good job of closing everything out.
Yeah, if he can recur this Dawnwalker somehow, though, back as a 6/3, this would be huge. But unfortunately, not finding a way to immediately. And so Akaria does resolve for VSarius. And yeah, this puts MaxiRC under a lot of pressure on how to answer this card. You know, MaxiRC has been stuck at 4 power for quite a while here. And a lot of his deck is it's very big. So waiting
Interesting
to see.
attack with the Wisp here. I'm not sure what it telegraphs. There's no real pump spells in the deck or any damage-based stuff.
Yeah, I can't think of anything that MaxiRC would be doing here. Definitely interesting that he decides to chip in with the Wisp. VSarius is just going to go ahead and drop the Sword of Akari and try and poke off the Wisp here and start bashing with the Akari on the way back, and likely going to connect here.
Yeah, and this Akari, even if this Akari gets dealt with, VSarius is a smuggler stash to get it back. He has to rise for another threat here, whatever he decides is more valuable. Another Akaria, which he does choose. He could have gotten Daisho or Maul there as well. So Maxi has to deal with a lot, and they don't want to deal with any of it. Again, they're just going to throw in the towel here. VSarius to take that 2-0 with a pretty overpowering performance.
Yeah, that was definitely a very overpowering performance. Unfortunately for MaxiRC, just not hitting his power there and not really enabling his game plan. We didn't see any of the Beast Caller's amulets or the, as some people have termed it in the past, the 5 matters strategy, where your 5 attack matters. That way he could have drawn some extra cards off the friendly Wisps. Not like really any Dark Returns, no Copper Conduits, just unfortunately nothing super exciting.
Yeah, I think Maxi's deck was just trying to do too much. It didn't really focus on one thing. There is certainly value you get from pressuring your opponent from various angles, but there is also a point when you're eroding your own strategy by diluting things. Like he's only able to play one Dawnwalker. We don't see any Sandstorm Titans. So there's the deck's trying to do a lot, which can pay off in other matchups, like in certain matchups, but then you're also paying a cost when things don't come together.
Yeah, it was it was just unfortunate. I think I think that's really the best way to put it. Just seeing a bit of power screwed there and not really having his pieces come together. VSarius playing well to his credit, though. His version of Armory working out quite well with his draws, and he was able to take those games very quickly. But we are about to jump into another match, I think, unless I'm mistaken. Yeah, we're going to go ahead and get into the RedWorld versus Drolicheck matchup. We got RedWorld, obviously, on that Fiery Combri, and Drolicheck, I believe, is on Big Combri or Voda Combo, even.
Yeah, we do see an aReNGee in play briefly. I thought that RedWorld might have been running it for a second, but it was the hit he got off Seraph. And having a lot of fun with aReNGee lately. We do see RedWorld actually pretty far ahead here. He has a lot of business at hand, ahead on board. And Drolicheck only has 3 cards left. So we'll see if Drolicheck has something like a Harsh Rule to come back from behind, or some of his own overpowering top end, coupled with this Iron Thorn to maybe come back.
Yeah, he might be able to find some way out, but what was... Oh, of course,
Okay.
of course. So the Harsh Roll follow-up. Yeah,
Just a free
sorry.
roll, jump check.
Yeah. Just making sure that RedWorld's committed to blocking that extra damage, and obviously he is. You know, he is at 8 life, so he does have to be very careful. We do have the Great Parliament coming down, putting 2 Owls in play, which does put Drolicheck on a 2-turn clock if he doesn't find something soon. And without seeing another Harsh Rule off the back there, this is putting Drolicheck under a lot of pressure to find some answer for this.
He could have his own Harsh Rule. His own Great Parliament to stabilize his own Harsh Rule, a Sandstorm Titan even. Let me check if Drolicheck is running Sandstorm Titan in his build.
Yeah, he's going to need something here, definitely. Sandstorm Titan would be good. Also, Harsh Rule or Great Parliament. You're going to need one of the 3.
He actually is not running Sandstorm. He's also not running Harsh Rule main deck. We did see him sideboard into at least one, the one that we just saw cast. So he only has potentially one more Harsh Rule in his whole deck.
Yeah, just casting Stand Together there, unfortunately. Yeah, Drolicheck not going to be able to take that, so RedWorld picking up that game. I'm unsure if the players are done or not yet. Looks like they are, in fact, done. Looks like that was game 3. So, yeah, just getting to check on the end of that game very briefly. We see RedWorld chalking up another win with that Fiery Combry deck.
Yeah, that deck has been doing very well. The red splash is at least maybe possibly worked out, at least not punished him. The core of the deck remains the same, but the splash of both Jack and Torch gives a deck that doesn't usually have a lot of interaction, some key interaction, and he's probably been getting paid off for it throughout the course of the day.
Yeah, we did see it earlier with the Torch coming in handy on a nice double block in game 1 that allowed him to pick up a free Sauropod. And I have to say, I am, kind of impressed with the splash of fire in the deck for those inclusions. They do end up working out, reasonably well, actually.
Yeah, it's also interesting to see it beat the Vodafone deck, because the Vodafone deck is actually situated in a spot where it's a little bit slower and a little bit bigger than the Fiery Combray deck. So traditionally that would convert to a better matchup, but it looks like Drolicheck wasn't able to cobble together his more powerful cards like Vodafone plus Temple Speaker, and just kind of got run over by the large creatures of the Fiery Combray deck. But we do have a backup match that we are going to move into shortly here with Toth against, actually not sure.
Yeah, we're gonna see as soon as it gets pulled up. Toth201 on his I believe this is Ikaria Gold. Yeah. He's versus a Mulligan, and he's on Ikaria Gold. I'm unsure of what Mulligan is on currently, but we see Toth doing a little bit of sideboarding here. Goes ahead and pulls out a few Rise to the Challenges, and this is a very interesting list. I'm pretty sure Toth has been on this list multiple times now. I think this is like his second or third week of bringing it, and this is almost kind of like his pet project.
Yeah, this is we've seen him play this deck a lot, have a lot of success with it, make top 8s in this tournament in previous weeks, and he's had a lot of time to hammer it out, tune it to the metagame, and it's still a good choice in the new metagame with the card changes. Didn't get any of its cards hit, and it actually benefits from the format slowing down a bit. So we'll see how he's chosen to change the deck, how it's worked out for him. I do see Stand Together, although this is post sideboard. I don't think those are main deck, but that's certainly a good option. Reality Warden as well. And yeah, Toth is up 1-0 in the series so far. So we will be moving into game 2 after he decides to hammer out the sideboard.
Yeah, and very interesting to note that they did have a long game 1 then, since we are just seeing the sideboarding for game 2. And yeah, some interesting choices being made. Briefly considering cutting a Torch, but maybe that was just a misclick. Immediately puts it back in. We saw an Ikaria come out, as well as a pair of or at least one of the Rises, might have been 2. I have a feeling an Auric Runehammer or 2 might have come out, since I'm only seeing 1 in the list. And I feel like he plays more than one main deck.
He is his opponent is playing Elysian midrange, with False Prince, Cerso, Sandstorm Titan, all the big large creatures. He is also playing Whispering Wind and Ageless Mentor to pump the giant creatures even further. So Toth needs to stem a lot of this aggression and be able to deal with these giant creatures. So that's why you'd want Torch to stand. I'm interested to see that he kept in Stand Together. There's not a lot of interaction out of the Elysian midrange deck. It does protect against Crystallize, but there's only one of those in the deck, so it's unlikely the 2 line up, but it does give you insurance from that.
Yeah, it is an insurance plan, but I do think that is a little unnecessary. Either way, though, just seeing Toth making these final sideboard decisions, he is finally down to 75 cards, but it looks like he's making sure that he's perfectly content, probably just checking over his opponent's deck list, trying to make sure that he tunes the sideboard perfectly for what his opponent is most likely changing their game plan into. We can take a look at Mulligan's sideboard in the meantime, since unfortunately we don't have his view. And he's got, a Permafrost, an Island's Favor, 2 Lightning Storms, 2 Lightning Strikes, 3 Decays, 2 Scorpion Wasp, a Lumen Defender, 2 Mystic Ascendants, and a Passage of Eons.
And it'd be interesting to see how aggressive he wants to stay. The Mystic Ascendants are obviously powerful in a matchup like this. Permafrost could possibly deal with some of the threats, prevent them from blocking. That'll be good if you want to just maintain a more aggressive posture. But outside of that, maybe some Decays, possibly some Scorpion Wasps. There's a lot of marginal cards here. The big one that stands out to me is Mystic Ascendant, but that slows down your deck a bit, and the Elysian midrange deck built this way does want to maintain being the aggressor.
Yeah, they definitely do. They want to grab control of the game from the early turns and just continually abuse their opponent with overvalued creatures in False Prince, Sandstorm Titan. Ageless Mentor, when that goes off, can make those threats very, very difficult to deal with outside of just strictly hard removal.
Yeah, usually they get a lot of value out of their creatures just being enormous, and Cerso just rumbles with anything, because anything that gets in combat with him trades with a pig. So we'll see if Mulligan is able to maintain that aggressive role, or if Toth's able to blunt it as we move here into game 2 with Toth up 1-up.
Yeah, and let's see the opening hands here. Toth with a very interesting opening hand. This is going to be very slow and defensive. Good for him. Has that rise to the challenge in hand, so he will be able to fish out a threat of his choice around turn 4.
Yeah, and he can actually take off turn 4 because he has the harsh rule. So normally a deck that's playing things like Sandstorm Titan and Dawnwalker and False Prince was like, it's going to put a lot of pressure on you and really punish you for taking off turn 4 to essentially do nothing. But because he has the harsh rule and now a second one, as long as he's able to get enough power over the next couple turns to get up to cast those spells, he will be able to take a turn off to rise, then clean things up, and then play whatever he rise for.
Yeah, absolutely. He can afford to take that turn off, hopefully later on, with those harsh rules as his insurance plan. And Mulligan, in the meantime, we're going to see if he can get himself off to a fast start, a very quiet turn 1. Turn 2 looks like he at least has a little bit of consideration here as to what he wants to do, and does decide to get a Whispering Wind into play. Curious to see if Toth is going to feel the need to respond to that or not.
Generally, you want to fire off a Desert Marshal on Whispering Wind. It just accrues so much value. It prevents your it mitigates flood so heavily. It allows you to get rid of cards that are bad in a given matchup or given situation. So whenever you can prevent a Whispering Wind from attacking, it's generally correct to do so.
And we do see Toth electing to take that line of play, goes ahead and Desert Marshal silences the Whispering Wind down, and decides actually not to make a block there. And Mulligan, with the Dawnwalker coming down, Toth going to need to find a 5th power for this harsh rule. May just elect to go ahead and rise here for a weapon.
Yeah, he could rise for something like Orc Runehammer. He could be super conservative and rise for an Amber Acolyte to make sure he has power going forward. Not sure he needs to do that. But there are a lot of options here. Reality Warden, also the one of in his deck. Jack possibly was another expensive card. He has a pretty wide toolbox here to choose from, and I can see a lot of things being defensible. He does choose to go with Desert Marshal to deal with his Dawnwalker.
Yeah, and it's very cool to see the Ikaria Gold deck actually rise to the challenge, because unlike Armory, which is where we normally see rise to the challenge, the Ikaria Gold deck just has so many cards it can pull with that rise to the challenge that do so many different things. It is quite a wide range in the toolbox, you could say. Just so many different things the deck can pull out between Desert Marshal, Marshal Ironthorn, Sandstorm Titan, Ikaria, and those are just a few of the threats. There's plenty more to follow.
Chiefly reactive cards like Wasp and Desert Marshal allows Rise to Challenge to actually be a card that deals with opposing threats as opposed to just a way to find more of your own threats. So that gives the deck a lot of flexibility. And we'll see if he chooses to fire off a Torture on the Wolf Lynx. He does. He's just going to hang out to this Desert Marshal. He really wants to wait until they play a 5-power creature, getting back the Dawnwalker, and then tag the Dawnwalker.
Yeah, and in the meantime, Mulligan just taking this very slow, using Seek Power to grab a power and not actually having any type of 4-drop to play. So it really makes you wonder what he's got packed away in that hand.
Yeah, his deck is very proactive. There's not a lot of things he wouldn't have played. Like the overwhelming majority of his deck is creatures. So we just see a False Prince come down now. But maybe telegraphing a bit of weakness there for Mulligan. Maybe he just ripped that False Prince and is kind of sitting on air.
Yeah, quite possibly. We're going to see. Curious to see what Toth elects to do with this turn. He's got a lot of directions he can go. He's got 2 vanquished targets, although he will just turn that False Prince into a frog. Probably going to see... Well, I'm curious to see if he'll ambush in the Desert Marshal at the end of his turn. Probably will, since he used the Rise to fish it up for the Dawnwalker, but
I do like the pass here because the Sandstorm Titan is keeping everything back. You're not really compelled to do much. Mulligan has to do something to change the board. You just sit back on the Sandstorm Titan, this Desert Marshal, see what happens. Probably like even block here. I'm not sure what punishes you. Like possibly Crystallize, but I think you're fine with that. Or Lightning Storm, I guess, is the big one, but and then we see Crystallize.
Wow, yeah, we do see a Crystallize come down. So, I mean, that eats Mulligan's whole turn away, and Toth still can Desert Marshal in and silence down this Dawnwalker if he wants to. But I think Toth is actually just going to wait and fire off a Harsh Rule this turn instead. Does actually have the ability to just Marshal Iron Thorn and power up. Not particularly worried if he takes that line either, since there isn't a lot threatening his board right now. We just saw Mulligan obviously have to use that Crystallize and a False Prince to 2-for-1 himself for the single Sandstorm Titan. So that should signal Toth that the path is relatively clear.
Yeah, Harsh Rule there isn't great. You're essentially only killing the 1/2 and the 1/1. The the Dawnwalker would come back at some point. So I do like playing a 5/5 that blocks everything. You leave up Desert Marshal if you want to do that, and you still have the board pretty stable.
Ooh, and we see a Reality Warden picked up out of Toth here. Reality Warden, actually, I don't. Yeah, this card's actually super important in this matchup. This allows him to get away without having to Desert Marshal away the Dawnwalkers. And we are going to see Toth vanquish down this False Prince. Notably, though, that doesn't actually kill it, just changes it into a frog, since after you target it with Vanquish, it becomes an untargetable target for Vanquish. That's really weird to say, but...
Yeah, there's essentially how that resolves. And I'm also interested that he didn't play Reality Warden on that turn, because I thought Reality Warden plus leave up Desert Marshal was a reasonable thing. Mulligan still can't attack, give a very potent board. But he decided to throw off the Vanquish in a situation where I'm not sure he needed to. I didn't think that False Prince really mattered. But he wants to protect this Reality Warden, I guess, valuing pretty highly. And this this Desert Marshal is actually going to tag the Dawnwalker, which is weird because now this Whispering Wind is uncontested, and the Whispering Wind can actually draw Mulligan a lot of business in a spot where he's pretty obviously on air.
Yeah, I think, honestly, Toth is considering, since he... Well, never mind. It looks like he's going to just end his turn. I kind of had a feeling that Desert Marshal silence meant that he was ready for this board to go away. But yeah, I mean, I think passing the turn here, honestly, it doesn't feel good to Harsh Rule this board, obviously. I think you definitely are worried about that you're losing more value than you're actually gaining. But that Whispering Wind is just such a threatening engine. Like, we're going to watch this Stormlinks get pitched by Mulligan, and whatever he picks up could just be a lot more threatening. I mean, we could see Cerso, we could see Sandstorm Titan, and there we go. We do, in fact, see a Sandstorm Titan now. So I feel like you have to Harsh Rule away now.
Yeah, and I think that's what Toth was setting up. They knew that the Whispering Wind was likely to get something of value, and then they could just Harsh Rule it away. But you kind of just could have killed the Whispering Wind in the first place, and they not have had the business. So it's kind of net neutral. You pay like 2 life for that. Doing it in that order, but he does have this Reality Warden back. It's incredibly large. It's going to deal with anything that's not called Cerso. So he should be able to rumble with anything or most things at least, that Mulligan's able to present from here.
Yeah, and we do see a Reality Warden still hanging out in Toth's hand, so he will be able to get this down, and as you noted, this will be able to handle this Titan pretty well. That was Mulligan's plan to reload, so he ended up dropping a Sandstorm Titan, and Mulligan's definitely going to need some really good cards in his hand here, and with the pass there, it's hard to tell. It looks like he's just blanking, and Great Parliament's a very big pickup for Toth.
Yeah, Parliament's huge. It was interesting. Toth had the option last turn of essentially paying 5 life by allowing the Sandstorm Titan to hit and not playing the Reality Warden to try and get a 2-for-1 out of this harsh roll. But we saw him play the Reality Warden, and now the attack actually doesn't get blown out by, well, it kind of gets blown out by the Stormlinks. Trading the Reality Warden for the Sandstorm Titan is not where you want to be, but having this follow-up Parliament kind of makes everything irrelevant. This presents a 3-turn clock, so it's not exactly 2. It's a little slow, but again, Mulligan doesn't have a lot to do with flyers as outside of Sandstorm Titan, and he's already gone through 2, but there's the 3rd.
Yeah, it looks like a lack of Titans is not a problem Mulligan is going to have here. Plenty of sand to go around, and he does in fact lock those birds down to the board, and now Toth is actually in a bit of a tough situation. He's only holding a single harsh rule, which will kill off this whole Great Parliament, and now we see a Permafrost coming down out of Mulligan. Combra Healer, not where Toth wants to be.
So Toth actually gets to maneuver the game into a spot where this harsh roll is good, potentially, because the Sandstorm Titan can't attack it at a 2/4 profitably, so Mulligan's going to need to play more threats, and once he does that, this harsh roll could actually become profitable. So we'll see how, like, and we see, like, by Toth not playing the Combat Healer there, that's what he's playing towards. And a Call of the Ancients, well, maybe the Whispering Wind can find some 6/6s here.
Yeah, and it very likely will be able to. This is going to be intense. I've never seen a Call of the Ancients cast in a ranked match, so we'll see how lucky Mulligan is feeling here. See if he can dredge them up somehow. Ooh, and a polymorph. This is actually big now. Like you were saying, the board was locked down to this point, but now it has opened back up, and we're going to have to see Toth probably commit this harsh rule sooner than he would have liked to.
Yeah, the Whispering Wind has to chump attack there, but it did turn a Primal Sigil into something, and that Vanquish off the top is really good for Toth. He now doesn't have to fire off the harsh rule, although he can still not fire off the harsh rule. Essentially, again, pay 5 life to allow Mulligan the opportunity to overextend into this harsh rule and make it a valuable card, because right now it's like not. And that Vanquish was likely going to be good in most situations. So I would have liked to see Toth try and leverage the game to a spot where this harsh rule is good, because now he's extended so far into the board that it's just going to at best set things back to neutral.
Yeah, that is very true. Now that the board is essentially back to neutral, this isn't an amazing spot, but Toth actually picking up Seraph might not care now. Yeah, and if he goes ahead and drops the Seraph, I have a feeling this harsh rule isn't going to get played anytime soon this game. We see Horn of Vorlunk coming off as a 6/8 with Overwhelm, and funnily enough, that is the biggest creature on the board, so it will get to dictate how the bashing goes. Although Cerso getting played is very relevant, and another harsh rule off the top for Todd leaves 2 dead cards in his hand.
Although the Cerso off the Seraph checks the other Cerso, they would end up trading into each other, just making each other pigs. But up until that point, Cerso threatened to actually have profitable attacks on the board, although the crackback would have been pretty large. But again, Seraph doing a lot of work. It's been hitting a lot of the better outcomes here in the Eternal Tournament Series.
Yeah, and we do see Titan coming down out of Mulligan's deck, but unfortunately, I'm not sure it's going to matter at this point. Yeah, I think if you're Toth, you definitely go ahead and get in here with the Cerso. At worst, the Cersos just trade each other off, but at best, you're going to take a threat and push a bunch of damage through, or get a 2-for-1. Like that, it was pretty inevitable that he was going to get a 2-for-1 there. And the Scorpion Wasp off the top actually takes away Toth's clock for the time being. Mulligan going to be able to hold down the fort in the meantime, especially with Toth picking up another power.
Yeah, Mulligan can now he can try to extend the game and draw some cards, but the Seraph is likely to generate things better than Mulligan's average draw step, so the inevitability is still on the side of Toth. I'm not sure what Mulligan can draw to this point now that the Crystallize is gone. I'm not sure I can break this board stall. It's something that Elysian is generally very bad at, and it's why we run Crystallize. But now it's gone, I think that it's going to be very, very difficult for Mulligan to punch through this board.
Yeah, I would have to agree. I don't think he's going to have a way to do it here. And we see, since we have been joking about it all day, the idea that this Seraph hits very nicely. We see 3 pretty average Seraph hits in a row, and Sauropod, Wrangler, Spire Chaplain, and the Favor.
Spire Chaplain is good enough here, though. Attacks into anything. Like we see the Spire Chaplain, the Horn Vorlunk actually outclassing the Titan and the False Prince. So even Seraph on average presents really, really good cards.
Yeah, even the average cards, since they do get their stats doubled, are pretty impactful. We actually see a Mystic Ascendant coming out of Mulligan, and that might be a card that ends up being yeah, it's a way for him to generate some additional card advantage, which is something he desperately needs right now.
So the Mystic Ascendant holds back everything that isn't the Spire Chaplain, but the Spire Chaplain can get double blocked down by the False Prince of the Lynx, and as long as Mulligan can like try and make the game go longer, force value out of this Mystic Ascendant, maybe he could outclass the Seraph. It's unlikely, but it's his only shot at this point.
Yeah, very true. And I mean, Mulligan's going to have to find threats in the next turn or two, or Toth will be able to just present lethal, especially with this 5/5 coming off board. This basically opens the floodgates for Toth to start attacking with all of his units at once. Going to be hard for Mulligan to actually find profitable blocks.
I do think the way that Mulligan can claw back into this game is if he finds a way to answer the Seraph in either Polymorph or Permafrost, and then he actually steals back Inevitability with this Mystic Ascendant, so he can maybe get the board to a point where he's ahead. And this, like the Cerso locks down everything. He could play this, Toth could play the Wasp to present a 7-turn clock in the air, which he might do. I don't know what else he's doing. But if Mulligan's able to find an answer for the Seraph, I think he's actually able to win the long game. But that Desert Marshal changes things.
Yeah, Desert Marshal changes things quite a bit. I mean, if Toth picks up like really any threats, it is on him at any point if he wants to just, reset the board with one of these harsh rules. Mulligan completely played out of cards currently.
And he does hit the Cerso, which is interesting because now that line I was talking about before where Mulligan kind of steal back the Inevitability is live. The Cerso still blocks a lot. He could elect to trade here if he wants, or just take 6, go to 1, which is a little bit loose, but a thing you can do. So let's just see what path Mulligan chooses, and he does elect to trade.
There's something important to note that we didn't touch on. The last Seraph hit was actually a Champion of Glory, and Champion of Glory having quick draw and endurance right now being turned on would have been very scary had Mulligan not just hit a power right there. Would have been free attacks, but now it will at least get chump blocked down by the, or not chumped, but will get traded by Mystic Ascendant. We're going to see what this next Seraph hit holds, and 16/16 endurance. Yeah, Plated Demolisher. That's going to be pretty good for the time being.
Yeah, up until that point, Mulligan actually had really pretty reasonable blocks. The 8/8 checked the 6/6. The Dawnwalker can trade with the 4/4. The Lynxkin trade with the 4/2. So he was working towards stabilizing, but again, you can't really let a Seraph stay in play for this long. He really needed to find a Permafrost or a Polymorph to deal with it, but now the damage has probably been done.
I mean, I think the damage is done anyway. If Toth just ace spaces here, I'm pretty sure this is game. I mean, he's going to have 4 threats connect, so if the 16/16 and the 6/6 and the 4/4 are all blocked, there's still plenty of damage going around. That's 12 damage. And Toth, considering here if he even needs to just ambush in the Scorpion Wasp for an extra point of damage, doesn't actually need to. He is looking perfectly good here. Gonna wrap this game up one way or another.
Yeah, he will have to see that it's lethal on the alpha. He might just like autopilot and activate the Seraph, missing it as some players do. But he does see it here, and he is going to alpha attack, take away the 4 highest health creature, or four highest attackers the remainder is a total greater than Mulligan's life total.
Yeah, certainly. It is about 12 damage should be the final product when it all is said and done. Yeah, so Mulligan unfortunately going to find himself at -5 and find himself going down 2-0. Toth taking that one pretty convincingly with this Ikaria gold deck that he's been playing. And I did mention at the top, I have been very impressed with this deck for what it is. And I mean, it does have a lot of cool features of it, including notably, what we pointed out with the Rise to the Challenge. Like, I really like that aspect where you get to rise to the challenge for so many different threats. It's just such a cool component of the deck.
Yeah, and the fact that you have access to a bunch of interaction in the form of Jack, Desert Marshal, Scorpion Wasp, Valkyrie Enforcer, it just opens up a lot to you in the terms of interaction in a deck that is traditionally not able to interact well. I mentioned that the deck doesn't run any Mystic Ascendants, like not even one to rise for. I guess he is more aggressive with the Ikarias. That does make sense. So the deck is situated to be a long game with the Ikarias, but still a little bit vulnerable to things like bigger Combre and Vodkin.
Yeah, it can be vulnerable. Anyway, that is the last match of round 3. So we are going to take a very quick break, folks, and then we are going to jump straight back into round 4 in just a few moments. So stay tuned.